Welcome to 3 in the News. 3 in the News. A podcast for educators by educators. Brought to you by the Los Angeles Institute for Restorative Practices and Research, the authority on restorative practices in K through 12 education.
Hey everybody. Welcome to LARP's second podcast titled 3 in the News. The structure is simple. During every episode, we will analyze and discuss 3 dominant stories appearing in K through 12 news. Everything from teacher pay, cell phones, bullying, after-school programs, school policies, school politics, discipline, attendance, and much, much more. The podcast is focused on bringing in diverse views and perspectives on the news story, and we are excited to jump in. Of course, I have my co-host and the founder and CEO of LARP, Carlos Alvarez. How you doing today, my friend?
Hey, everyone. I'm doing well. I hope everyone's enjoying the end of the day, driving calmly, reflecting on all the amazing things you all engaged in today.
And
today's conversation.
And I have I usually start my apology tours later, but my apology to the team, to Candace, and I'm going to talk to Corey and Carlos, because this is actually the second take of the second episode. We had some issues with the recording, and I didn't realize it until the end. And so I came out to Corey. I reached out to Candace, and I was like, hey, would you be open? And Carlos one more time. And they jumped right in. And so I'm really grateful for that. But I want to...
This just shows we need to increase LARP's funding. So please support LARP.
Yeah, that's it.
We have to stop using the subscription versions, dude.
The free ones. And all right, I want to introduce our co-host. It is 3 in the News, 3 stories and 3 people analyzing it. I'm excited to introduce our third co-host, who wasn't here for the first one, Candace Dagnino. Right? Did I say that right?
You did. Yes, it's very phonetic, unique name, but easy to say. I'm the third leg of this tripod of hosts and excited to be here. My name is Candace Dagnino. I am an educator and an academic through and through. I love all things K through 12 education. Started my own education in Tucson, Arizona. I am a proud daughter of immigrants from Mexico, and I didn't always plan on being a teacher, and I'm so glad that the universe brought me to it, is taking me through it, still in education after many years. I'm entering my 14th year as a principal here in South LA. Love this work, and I'm also really honored to do this work as a consultant coach and so many other ways to support in my role as VP of Executive Leadership Development with the Los Angeles Institute for Restorative Practices. Happy to be here with you all and excited to jump into the conversations.
All right. And like we promised in the first episode, we're always going to have a special host, or a special guest, co-host. And I couldn't think of somebody, better to have on this second podcast once we got the wrinkles out, besides Mr. Corey Taylor. Mr. Corey Taylor, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, Will. Thank you for having me. I truly appreciate it. We have a long history, you and Carlos and I, and Candace, we have a shorter history, but it's great to be back here with you. And I look forward to the conversation.
All right. And so today we're going to start off with our first story that comes from Channel 9 News, an ABC affiliate station in Tennessee. The article addresses the fact that the state is currently facing a teacher shortage with nearly 1,400 positions, about 2% of the state's roles that are currently unfilled. While filling in all the positions is a challenge for stakeholders, some experts say that retaining is an even bigger challenge. To help fill the positions, the Tennessee Department of Education has launched an online hub offering centralized training, guidance, and resources to help teachers succeed. And, I want to start off the questions here. Corey, what are some challenges here when schools start without everybody in place, without having the complete faculty? They said 2% of the state's roles have yet to be filled. What are some challenges with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's completely disheartening because these are students who do not have an adequate instructor in front of them. So, starting a school year or finishing a school year or being in the middle of a school year without a full staff is it really demoralizes the morale of the student body and of the staff, and it doesn't set our students up for success. I mean, I know that all of us have worked and currently work with students who are considered, under resourced or underprivileged, and so even further underprivileging them by not having a full staff is just putting them behind they're just putting them behind everyone else, and so it's horrific to think of what the outcomes will be for the students who are going weeks and weeks without a qualified instructor in the classroom.
Yeah, and I mean, we think about those first couple weeks are so critical to establishing routines. And if you don't have an instructor there, even when you do have an instructor, you're almost setting them up for failure in a lot of ways. And Candace, you are a working principal right now. And I should say Corey right now, he was a principal and administrator for many years. Corey's currently working in a nonprofit organization and in Virginia. And so that's important. His experience has been, though, as a principal of a high school. Candace, you're currently a principal of a high school. Tell me, how did you get on ahead of this kind of position of not putting yourself in a position where you're hiring last minute? Or maybe you did. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think we got to talk about the fact that we hear this often, right? This like teacher shortage. And I don't believe that that's the case. I think that we really need to talk about how it's really a shortage of, I think, fair compensation, perhaps supportive working conditions. It's a systemic investment. I think that's really where we're falling short. And I will say I'm very fortunate to work for an organization where they have prioritized creating conditions that allow teachers to thrive and really to stay in the space where they can be passionate about what they're doing without having necessarily to worry about whether or not compensation is going to allow them to live their life. You all know, as teachers, we experience having to work multiple jobs probably during the summer. We're not getting paid as teachers during the summer. And, I think that we really have to consider wages. We have to consider conditions. And thankfully, this is not my lived reality in the organization that I'm with now, but it's definitely the reality in other schools that I've worked at, in other organizations I've been a part of, and in across the country. I unfortunately can't go back home to do this work where I'm from in Arizona, because Arizona is one of the states where just the starting salary for teachers is abysmal. 70% of comparable wages are less than that of what teachers earn. So I think we got to talk about that too.
Yeah, and thank you so much for that perspective. And Carlos, how do you retain? So I mean, the challenge here is not only in hiring teachers, but then the second challenge is retaining them. What have you seen that has worked? And what would you recommend out there for administrators?
This is such a great conversation, especially now that everything's starting back up, and a lot of administrators might be in this situation. It starts with, how are you influencing this level of the ambiance, and it's dictated by the environment, the culture. So now when you're thinking about when you're re-inviting teachers or promoting your school, that's one of the biggest things. And hiring practices are extremely important. Pay is extremely important. A lot of people that focus around investments would say, it's not everything, but money's not everything, but it's up there with oxygen. So one of the biggest things is, how are we cultivating as administrators these systems that embrace new teachers or teachers to deal with the stress? We're starting to see like this boom of stress, and there's so many situations occurring, and that are influencing one's ability to feel safe. So when you're combining, a person, feeling stressed out, already possibly tolerable stress or toxic stress, and other in entering a school culture that's problematic, that's inconsistent, and that you have a lot of student behavior issues, then it really starts weighing. I've known a lot of administrators that quit middle of the year and say, you know what, I'm just going to do something different. This is too much for me. And, like we have to think about it now more than ever in a very humanistic way.
Yeah. And we just talked, we just did a training, Carlos, in at a school where 90% of their staff is brand new this year. And, I think sometimes it's positive, but Corey, what do you think are some challenges of starting with the staff where 90% is new? What does that do to initiatives? What does that do to the momentum of the year, your ability to, implement change?
Absolutely. It's like starting over every single time, and you cannot get anything set in place if you have a new team that you're trying to once again reestablish what the norms are, how the culture is, and what the expectations not only for the students are, but for the staff is. You can't always begin with a brand new staff every year. That's the definition of a failure, right? If you're starting with 90% new staff each year, that's not going to be sustainable. And and I don't remember what the specific stat is, but most teachers leave because they feel that there is a lack of support and training from the administration. So if there is proper professional development, proper support, a proper mentorship and onboarding program, that will increase retention. And so that's something that I think is really big that I don't think is spoken about enough.
Yeah. And the number one factor, you kind of hit it there. The number one factor in teacher retention is actually the school climate. So, for all those people out there, hey, increase my pay and I'll stay. Pay is important and it matters, but it's not the number one factor. Definitely mentorship is even above teacher compensation, so if you have these supports in place and you have a positive culture that you're working with and a positive leader, you're more likely to stay. So Candace, I'm going to give you the last word on this before we move on to the second article.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that, because I started with compensation, and while I absolutely believe that we got to talk about the conditions that are keeping teachers or deterring them from staying, I think, or deterring them into different career paths, right? We do have to talk about just the humanity and the impact to the human being behind the work. I think that if we're not putting conditions in place, and it's tough for leaders to even attempt that problem because either resources aren't there, and then perhaps the compassion fatigue is impacting the leader, which then impacts their ability to lead more positive environments for teachers. These are all very cyclical, almost this cycle that you can't get out of if the things aren't there.
Agreed. Yeah, it's interconnected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that there's, to your point about this retention piece, it's such a big deal because, if every year you're having to start from scratch, you're teaching from the beginning, you really can't sustain long-term initiatives. And it's hard for families to fully trust that you have a system that's streamlined, or that you have structures that are going to allow for students to really learn and thrive as well. So ultimately, when we're centering students, we have to understand the impact to teachers, and do we have the conditions in place? And if not, then what's within the locus of our control. So I think it's very much multifaceted. It's definitely work to be done always. And so it's an unfortunate situation in a lot of places, and I think that we got to find places where they're doing it really well and start thinking through how do we replicate this.
Yeah, I the day I was thinking about quitting, they gave me a $50 gift card and I stayed. So
yeah, there you go. But this is to say that some turnover isn't necessary, though. So
yeah, it's right.
Is necessary.
Absolutely. Yes. And Corey, I wanted to hit that because it doesn't necessarily mean that the staff that's been together the longest is the most efficient. There are some districts where you need turnover. But charter schools tend to be on the opposite side, where you're always starting new and you're having to constantly people don't stay as long as they do in traditional schools, although that is changing. But yes, you're right, turnover is important. Carlos, last word. Carlos.
Yeah, Will, I was just thinking about that exact point. When you start thinking about changing and mindset, when you start doing the mindset work, school culture goes through this purging period. And for good or worse, or for good or bad or whatever, we have to start thinking about normal like people leaving the job is normal. And we start really thinking about when we start seeing big numbers that are impacting how one influences systems within students and, classroom management, that's where the problems really lie. So really thinking about, okay, why are we really inventorying the reasons why people are leaving? That's also formulating a good exit restorative meeting that's really allowing us to extract all this information.
Yeah, and to improve. So, okay, so our second story, as we're heading back to school, we know that many students are planning on taking on extracurricular activities. Our second article from KTUU in Alaska addresses the challenges many students and parents face in balancing both academics and extracurriculars. This article provides advice to students based on such as be a student first and an athlete second, and take advantage of all the extra help and opportunities offered by your teachers. With fall sports set to kick off across the country this upcoming month, this article stresses that success starts with staying on top of academics first, then excelling in athletics. And Carlos, I'll start off with you here. As a leader, as a school leader, what are some of the challenges of running these kind of extracurricular programs?
Well, there's way more benefits overall, but we do see some challenges, and the challenges there goes into personnel, goes into having very clear systems around what builds a student athlete. You start really not having a solid program when there's ambiguity with that. So the biggest issues that I've ever seen rise were around putting the right people to supervise the programs.
Yeah.
And what's also the continuity of learning? What, can your sports initiatives embrace your core values? So really doing work around that. So
yeah. And Corey, I know you have 3 kids, and two of them are currently in high school, probably in the middle of involved in extracurriculars.
Yeah.
You have this parent perspective. What are some challenges you face as a parent in juggling academics and extracurriculars?
Yeah, it's sort of what battles do you pick to fight, right? Do I want my kids to always clean their room, or do I want them to make sure that they've, finished their homework at night because they're coming home after, at 6:00 because they've had practice or whatever during the day. It really is a tough, it's tough to balance. And school should not just be academics. You should have an outlet of some sort. I believe that for school. I believe that for work. I believe that for us as adults. But so as parents, we have to do our best to protect them from the dangers of overworking yourself in one area, and making sure that we are there to support them both academically, social, emotionally, and for whatever their physical needs are. And so if we need to just pick up some slack, whether I need to go in my daughter's room and clean it up a little bit for her because I know she's dog tired, or if I need to, make sure that I take an extra turn doing the dishes that night, then, I will, because I want to make sure that they are set up for success. But the problem is not everybody has the luxury of having, a 2-parent home where the mom and the dad can, collaborate on all those things.
Yeah, so we got the perspective from Carlos in terms of some of the logistics of the personnel running the program. We have the parent perspective. Give us the administrators, Candace, principal perspective here. Like, what are some of the challenges? I know you are in a position where academics is how schools are judged, but you also know that this is how we keep kids happy and engaged. And how do you balance that?
Yeah, and not just happy and engaged. I think that it's developmentally necessary, right? Our kids need to be well-rounded. It also makes them more competitive, so they're dependent on each other. And I don't think that a solution really is to pick one over the other. I think similarly to Corey's point, it's really about building a culture where both matter. And that means that schools, coaches, the families, we all got to work together. And it's about protecting study time the same way that we protect practice time. It's about making sure that we get rest days, and that they're not just for muscles, but they're resting our minds too. And I think that we need to celebrate academic wins as much as the athletic ones. That's really the striking this balance, because at the end of the day, the goal isn't just to raise great athletes or just great students. It's to raise great human beings who know how to balance both and can carry the skill into the rest of their lives.
Facts.
Yeah. And I think, one of the challenges is that when schools were structured in a way with extracurriculars, it was a way to keep kids engaged and hooked into the school. We're always looking for ways to motivate students. And some of the kids that need the most motivation are the kids that are the most involved. And we've had this problem all the time where, you have that kid, he wants to play football. And all of a sudden, for that first semester, he's doing all his work, he's doing his grades, and then football season ends, and then all of a sudden you're like, what are we going to do to keep him motivated? So Carlos, talk a little bit about that. Like, what are some, when sports are done, extracurriculars are done, how do you keep kids motivated?
Well, I think we all have a personal story when it comes to that. And we're not only thinking about you're good, your CIF sports or your sports that require, certain GPA, et cetera. But I'm also thinking about your after-school enrichment programs, those enrichment programs that offer an outlet for your students. I remember, Corey, when you were an administrator, right? Will was an AP at the high school we were at. We had very little funding, and we didn't have a lot of sports. It was like this distance that you needed to travel to go into just parks. In California, it's very rare to have green grass in your property. So I remember we were like, you know what? I have students. We're having a lot of behavior issues, and I would have an excess of 20, 30 kids stay after school doing restorative time. And I'm like, what am I going to do with the most highly spirited scholars, and they were driving me insane. I'm telling you, oh my God. So what we started thinking about, okay, we're going to go lift weights. So we started this small little gym, and that created a significant movement. Not only just on building motivation for students that didn't have the motivation to even be in school, and they found these little micro doses of motivations within. They had small successes. They were, measuring, weighing themselves in a very healthy way, because we combined it with healthy ways of eating, healthy ways of exercise, body image, and we would front load it with that advisory material, and it created a lot of student belonging. And the students that wouldn't talk to each other in a normal day setting, you would see them, spotting each other, which was amazing. And I remember, Corey being one of the biggest advocates, we started pushing it, and we started okay, we're not lifting yard sale weights anymore. We're going to get rubber bumpers now and blades. And we even had shirts. We had teachers join in. So it creates a lot of beautiful situations. And not only that, a lot of the students now are in their mid-20s, and we stay in contact with them, and they're still they lean towards physical activity as an outlet, which I have to say, our high school had a little bit to do with that.
I agree with that.
I mean, nothing like setting up a gym between two bungalows.
One of them was my classroom. It was the back of my class.
I was like, can we buy something to cover the sun? It's 200 degrees. And Corey goes, we only have $60. Let's go get a blue tarp.
Well, I remember we got
a blue gardener's tarp.
Yeah.
We had some feral cats around, and we had to get rid of them before we could start that gym. But yeah, Carlos, I agree. I think it impacts everybody positively to have sports, to have that kind of an outlet, that extra outlet. And that includes the staff, to end here. And Corey, I'll give you the last word. A lot of times the students are spending more time at school than they are at home with their parents. It was common to arrive at 7 a.m. And to have students already there, and then see them stay, for soccer or for football or volleyball. And then you're leaving at 5 and they're leaving at 5 with you, and sports are positive in terms of helping students identify with the school, but they can be draining. Yeah. And Corey, what's the last word on this?
Just going back to where we work together. When I first stepped into an administrative role, I was the athletic director. And that's really what got me involved in knowing most of the students, because I have to say, of the 500 and some odd students that we had over about 50% of them in a sport. And that was something that we were very proud of, because we started launching new things. We had the basketball, the soccer, we had the football, but then we got into we started the weightlifting, then we got into wrestling, and we got into volleyball. And so we started, ramping up the program. And I think that that really turned the corner for us. And it gave us an opportunity to, one, build that camaraderie in school, but also two, be a force to be reckoned with, because we before I left, I know we won our softball championship. And so now we were known, as a school, and we weren't just, this place to be thrown away. So we were an actual competitive school, both academically and sports wise. So I think that gives a little bit of, that puffs up your chest a little bit more. And so I think that, as Candace said, balancing both is critical. So I would recommend to anybody, whether it's sports, whether it's book club, whether it's charcuterie club, whatever, get into something. Yeah, my daughter was in charcuterie club. Yeah, absolutely.
Knock it till you try it.
I don't even know what that is. So
I mean, we grew up on Lunchables. I think millennials know more than anything about charcuterie.
There you go.
All right. So our final article comes from NBC News. As the new 2025 school year begins across the United States, immigrant communities are increasingly reluctant to send their children to class. Reports reveal this widespread absenteeism stems from fears of immigration enforcement, especially ICE raids. In some cases, absenteeism has increased by almost 25 to 30%. These fears are particularly pronounced in the Latino and mixed status households, where parents worry about detentions during school drop-offs or pickups. Studies show that massive economic fallout, including labor force exits in California, and long-term mental health and developmental consequences for children. So, Candace, I want to go to you first. How is this crackdown, this Trump's crackdown on illegal immigration, impacting the start of schools in California?
Yeah, I think, well, we got to think about just like the words that are used, right, to do this work, regardless of one's opinion. I think that when you start to identify people as illegal, I think it's very much a dehumanizing effect, and intentionally done. I think that this is very much an intentional approach. So absolutely, the fear that's instilled is impacting attendance to schools. I think you also have to consider, though, it's not just about academic damage. Like, obviously, kids can't learn when they're not in school, but these raids rip at the emotional fabric of our communities. They inflict trauma. They're eroding the trust that once made schools feel like safe havens. And I think that we can't lose sight of that, because the absence of students today really does become this educational and emotional gap of tomorrow. We have to consider just all the aspects of what is happening, and it's not just about attendance. That's huge. That was really what was at the center of this article. And while we, have to consider that and the impact to learning, it's like what is happening to the actual human being, the trauma that lives with people and communities forever.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing, because the article talks about illegal immigration, but you're right, that term has very negative connotations. We were looking at different terms of like undocumented students. What is the term to talk about this? Without giving it more power or fire. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What's that term?
I mean, I think that people can argue this from one way to the other. And I think ultimately we have to stop with labels that don't center the human being first. We've had conversations about, we break the law, and I'm sure we've all, maybe I'm the only one who's ever gotten a ticket.
I got a ticket like 2 weeks ago. So yeah.
and at that point,
we're all illegal drivers as well.
My point is, as much as we try to, we're making light of it now, but I recognize all of us this is a very serious thing, but we don't refer to people as illegal when they break these laws in that way, right? But yet very intentionally, it's said this way. I think that we got to talk about people. They're people first. And we do this in education all the time. We don't talk about SPED kids. That's not appropriate. It's a student who's receiving education services through special education, a student who's in the English language development. It's people first. Language matters because words matter. And I think that kids as young as kindergarten, pre-K, TK, they're internalizing these words. And I think we do have to pay attention to that. So I think undocumented, students whose status is in question, I think at the end of the day, what matters most is that they're people who are being impacted because their communities are being ripped apart by these raids.
Yeah, I thank you so much for that perspective, Carlos. And let me ask you, as parents are worried and concerned about sending their kids to school, what would you say to them during this time?
Well, not only, we've trained several school districts in the past couple of weeks, and there's been several schools that not only their parents are scared, terrified, but the teachers, the educators for their students, and Candace hit it right on the head. It's just tearing this situation of safety, and now augment that with what we're seeing in the media. There was a student that was like 15, I feel like a couple of weeks ago, and he got picked up, and he was a student that had was engaged in, I feel, was a student with special needs.
Yeah, he was. The story came out of LA Unified School District, where the student was 15, and he was, I think, in a wheelchair, or had some kind of walking, disability, and he was picked up, and it turned out to be completely without cause. And but as he was picked up, I mean, everybody around saw what happened.
So now you start adding that situation to parents, just fear overall, and I feel that that's the biggest thing that parents are confronting is like, will my son or daughter get caught up in this situation? And also we have to start thinking about experiencing this work firsthand with students. You start there's a lot of students that start assuming the role of the father figure or the caregiver or the provider. We've been in situations where families have been separated because they caught the father, and now the students stopped coming to school because now the students are doing the runs now and they're doing stuff. So it's not just impacting the situation of I'm scared of going to school, something might happen to me, but it's also tearing at the sustainability of how someone lives their life. When you think about like Maslow's hierarchy, I'm not really going to care about school, man. I need to care about my family. I need to care about my mom. And that's the real impact that we're starting to see. And it's a ripple, when you start seeing situations like that, it influences a lot of fear. It influences a lot of different emotions. And, so we just got to really think about that.
So, and Corey, I know you're out there in Virginia, and you have somewhat of an outsider's view of what's happening in California, where Candace is at, where Carlos is at, where I'm at. What is that perspective from the outside? That you're seeing, and what have you seen in Virginia?
California is home, so I definitely it always hits hard when it hits close to home. So I worked in schools with you guys, and so I know that the population of the students that we worked, or the population of students that we worked with, it was 89% Hispanic and Latino where we were, and so I know that large communities are being affected. Of course, Virginia and where I am in Central Virginia, not necessarily having the same population by size, but of course we still have the Hispanic and Latinx population, and people are afraid, and rightfully so. And I think that both brown and black alike are worried about where our nation is going, and I don't know that it's going to matter, or our protests or our chants and whatever are going to make a change until, sadly, more white faces are taking action as well. If right now people are looking at it with an oh, that's not affecting me lens, and it's easy to not get involved if it doesn't affect you. And so I need more people to step up and say, you know what, this is wrong. More Christian people to step up and say, you know what, this is wrong. This is not how families should be treated. It is not biblical in any sense. And so if you try to apply any biblical connection to this, it is the exact opposite of what Jesus would do.
Yeah. When you use scripture to justify something, that there really is a misunderstanding of scripture itself. And I mean, not, and Carlos, I want to jump into, the parents, the students, what about the teachers? What impact do you think this is having on the teachers in the classroom? And Candace, you're seeing this firsthand as well, of how they might be interacting with their students.
By vicarious trauma, when a teacher that has built a relationship with a student and now they're seeing these situations impact this student, bringing pain and separation, the teacher is going to feel that. As human beings, with compassion for another person is self-referential, so you're going to absorb it yourself.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing now is more teachers that start feeling this feeling of hopelessness, like I cannot help this scholar. Right? I leave. When I leave at 4 or 5 p.m., the student goes home and deals with that situation. So there's a lot of different emotions, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of burnout is happening because of that. Just the landscape of education is not the same. Yeah. And it's requiring more and more individuals that, to lean in and listen and be very responsive to the human component of all this. Yeah. And also, just thinking about whenever we're seeing stuff like this, kids are at the end of the day have immature brains and they're going to engage in different things. So this is also perfect opportunities to engage in curriculum, in lessons, and talk to your students about what's happening. Don't just be responsive, right? Like when you're thinking about, okay, let me turn off this fire, let me deal with this, but also get in ahead of it and start building awareness with other students around, hey, what's happening, and explaining possible ramifications of seeing this type of environment in your school.
Yeah. Candace, I want to give you the last word here, on this topic. What impact is it having on educators and just maybe you as a principal?
Yeah. I think we've talked a lot about the trauma and that goes without saying. Absolutely. I don't want to repeat that piece, but I do want to also just really shine light on the fact that our teachers are willing and ready to step up. They are stepping up. To Corey's point, absolutely. I think that you got teachers at the front lines of this work in so many different ways. And it's really heartbreaking that we ask this of teachers. We ask this of them when we talk about active threats on campus. We ask this of them when they have kids coming to school who haven't eaten, who don't have care and resources at home. And our teachers step up. They step up every single time. They're stepping up now. They're creating safe spaces. They're building rapid response networks. They're distributing Know Your Rights cards. They're offering the 24/7 mental health supports in the best way that they can, because obviously they're not the professionals, the counselors, but schools are still stepping up to offer these things, and not just to the students, but to families, because it's the entire unit that we're supporting. So yeah, it's not just a student absence problem. It's a trust breakdown. And our teachers see this. Our teachers are doing their best. I think our educators in general. And I think that it's not about needing, more surveillance. It's really to this piece around coming together and fighting this fight together. It's about solidarity. It's about protection and reassurance. Because while the raids take away the safety, I think that it's our job to ensure that it stays. And every child deserves to walk through our school gates without fear, not only so that they can learn today, but so that they can really, truly dream about tomorrow.
Yeah. I really appreciate how you stated that, and that is our second podcast, our second try at a second podcast, and I want to thank everybody for sticking with me, not giving up on me through this process as we're learning how to get content out there for LARP, how to communicate and meet educators where they're at. We have a blog, we have a podcast, we have different things that we're doing to get information out there. But of course, our conference, we have a conference coming up on November 5th through the 7th. We have the North American Restorative Conference in Downey, California, being hosted by the Los Angeles Institute of Restorative Practices. And so we're excited for that. We have a lot of things coming up. But, I wanted we did it last time. It was really genuine. This one, it might seem a little contrived, but still, I wanted to thank Corey. You know, Corey was you guys might not know this, but he was my boss. He was Carlos's boss. And then he was, you know, at a point I was his assistant principal, and so we were, colleagues. We're working on the same problems all the time, and I was just so grateful for Corey. You know, there's a thing that I read the other day. You're not a leader until you produce more leaders, and Corey, like, look around you, everybody that was in your team, directly under you, like, is in a leadership position now in some capacity, and I think that has a lot to do with you. Awesome. And I wanted to bring you into the second podcast, and I just want to thank you. And Carlos, how do you
thank you.
Well, you know, I just look at Corey and my feelings always, you know, I love this guy, and not only that, you know, Corey has an ability to create culture within staff, within people. And, you know, Toby, Candace, you highlighted this. He really sees the human in everyone, you know, and he really helps you build this space where you feel like an expert. You feel like you're part of something big. And you just came up earlier in the morning when me and Will were meeting, and we're like, yeah, you know, Corey was that type of person that you'd never want to let down, because he believes in you wholeheartedly. And, you know, you were the first one when, you know, many, many, many years ago, I'm like, hey, man, I want to get some certifications. Go for it, man. And you've always believed in the work, and you're just a genuine, and whenever I see you, it's just like brotherhood, brother.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, guys. Yeah, you are my brothers. Yeah. I mean, it was tough going from, you know, being co-teachers to then, you know, being the supervisor of the teachers. But, you know, you guys are my thought partners. You guys are my buddies. No, I really, truly appreciate, and I love you guys. And, you know, even after all these years, we haven't worked together for like 7-8 years, and still keep in touch weekly, if not, you know, more frequently.
I kind of honestly, like, that's just a hard transition going from teaching to being an administrator at the same school, but an administrator to these two.
Yeah.
You ran
I mean, we had more laughs than tears, that's for sure.
Yeah, we had a lot of great moments, and, you know, there's this quote that keeps coming up. It's like, I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you left them. And I think a lot about that, because I mean, so many things that that brought me joy and brought me happiness, and people that I honestly like, that I love, that I can't replicate those kind of deep relationships that I have now in my life, you know. And it was just like, it was effortless at that point. It's like, how did I wish I could go back, you know?
How do you get, like, I would look forward to our Christmas party. When I knew when it was like October was coming, like, oh, we're gonna have a Christmas party, and everyone would go. 90% of the staff would go.
Definitely a topic for another show, because we talked about teacher shortage, right? But it's about creating these situations, these experiences, this type of community. And I'll tell you, there isn't a playbook for that.
There's not.
It's a bit nuanced. It's really within one's adaptive leadership skill set, but it's relational. It's trust. It's building a healthy, safe space for people to really organically develop these and foster these relationships.
Well, thank you so much. I want to give a special shout out to Corey for being our first special guest. Candace, you know, one of the things about Candace, she's the working administrator among us, and, you know, she's been flexible with me, and her perspective is amazing and essential to this podcast. And Carlos, you know, you believe in me, man, and so I appreciate that. You gave me a second chance here with this podcast, and I'm excited. So you can check out the podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music. You can follow us on what do we have? Instagram. You can follow us on Instagram or LinkedIn, and share this podcast. And I want to thank everybody, and I hope everybody has a great day and a great drive. Bye, everybody.
All right.
Bye. Drive safe, everyone.